Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming out to one of the first sessions of NABIG 2021, focusing on the international perspectives on the basic income movement. My name is Walid, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. Personally, this is one of the sessions I'm most excited about because it's it's the only one where we're hearing from people from 3 different countries in 3 different continents, from Canada, Wales, and Kenya. Before we start and hear from our great speakers, I just want to go through some housekeeping items because I'm sure many of you are new to Crowdcast, as I am, and so we'll just kind of give you a brief overview of the platform. If you'd like to submit a question to the speakers, please post that in the Ask a Question button down by the bottom right. That's separate from the chat, which is on the right-hand side of the screen. If you ask a question using the Ask a Question function, you can also vote on other people's questions, which will help us prioritize which questions to ask our panelists. And in order to keep things moving, we might not get around to responding to any of the activity in the chat, so please make sure to use that Ask a Question function because that will increase the chances of us getting to your questions. Great, so let's get started. Our speakers for today come from nations at different stages in the basic income movement. We'll start off in Canada, where 2 researchers from Canadian universities will talk about the Ontario Basic Income Pilot that was unfortunately canceled, but yielded some interesting results nonetheless. Then we'll go to Wales, where the nation is just beginning their own basic income pilot, and our speaker today played a critical role in getting that on the national policy agenda. And then we'll also hear from Caroline from Kenya, who has been running one of the world's largest basic income experiments in Kenya with Give Directly. So without further ado, I'll pass it off to Kendal and Beth, who will be sharing their research with the NABIG community. Beth Martin is an assistant professor in the School of Social Work at Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada. Her practice experience is in international social work and with immigrants and refugees in Canada. Her research is at the intersection of social work and critical policy studies and centers the experience of policy users. And right now, one of her current projects explores the experiences of participants in the Ontario Basic Income Pilot. She primarily teaches courses on social policy, research methods, and migration to Canada. Kendal David is based in Calgary, Alberta. She's a PhD student at Carleton University with social work experience in the disability sector, community development and organizing, and research. And while completing her undergrad social work placements, she grew more interested in basic income activism as a response to inadequate social policy and flawed approaches to addressing income security through charity and philanthropy. So that is enough from me. I will now pass it off to Kendal and Beth for their presentation.
Awesome. Okay. Is the share screen working? Can we see the?
If Walid
Yep.
could, yeah, perfect.
There you go.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Basic Income for Social Justice, a mixed methods intersection analysis of experiences in the Ontario Basic Income Pilot. I'm Dr. Beth Martin. I'm speaking to you today as a settler and a guest on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin peoples.
And my name is Kendal. I just graduated with my MSW from Carleton, and I'm starting my PhD in the fall. I'm presenting today from the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda. And the city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. We believe it's important to continually reflect on how our research relates to the colonization of Indigenous peoples in Canada, and spend a lot of time thinking about how to decolonize our research and to do work that benefits all who live on Turtle Island. And today we're going to talk about some recent findings of a research project on the Ontario Basic Income Pilot and how we might be able to leverage them internationally.
So in this presentation, we'll first provide some context about the Ontario Pilot Project. That's the most recent state of basic income in the province of Ontario in Canada. And then we'll briefly introduce the research projects that we're involved in. In the findings section, we'll first go over some of the key findings on health and quality of life outcomes. Then we're going to focus in on how basic income and the design thereof can change people's attitudes towards and relationships with government. We found this was an interesting aspect of the findings that hasn't been written about as much in the literature to date. And then this is going to lead into a discussion on how these lessons could potentially be leveraged internationally. So Canada, as some of you may know, has a federal political system with a complex and messy division of responsibilities between the federal and the provincial governments. Income support programs for older Canadians are run primarily at the federal level. For Canadians of a working age, there's a mishmash of different programs. These have strict eligibility requirements and really cumbersome application processes. At the federal level, we have employment insurance, EI, which has extremely strict contributions-based criteria. People in the province of Ontario who do not qualify for employment insurance must rely, if they can, on Ontario Works, OW, or the Ontario Disability Support Programme, ODSP. Both of those are means tested. The levels of support provided in these programs are well below the poverty line, and the programs have done little to reduce levels of poverty in the province. So the Ontario Basic Income Pilot, or OBIP, was designed explicitly as a poverty reduction program. It aimed to establish whether an unconditional basic income would be effective compared with OW and ODSP. Rates were based on household income, size of household, and disability status. The amount provided was significantly higher than ODSP and OW, a 66% and 98% increase respectively. However, there was a reduction in healthcare benefits compared with the provisions under ODSP. OBIP was one of the largest basic income pilots in the world when it was implemented in 2017. It had about 4,000 participants aged 18 to 64 who were living below the poverty line. They were in 3 sites across the province. That's the map on the right-hand side there. You can see the three different sites where they did the pilot. The project was designed for 3 years, and participants were required to take part in the accompanying research. But an incoming Conservative government, despite their campaign promises, abruptly cancelled the project and associated research. So academic and community researchers tried to step in to fill some of the knowledge gaps that were left. And that's where this project comes in. So this presentation builds on an academic project out of McMaster University in Hamilton. I see some of the participants in the original project are actually here, so I might be able to answer questions later as well. They collected data from pilot participants in the Hamilton-Brantford site. Our presentation today is based on secondary analysis of the qualitative data that they collected in that project, primarily from data from 46 interviews. Almost 60% of the interviewees were female, close to 50% were between the ages of 25 and 44, and the rest were 45 to 63. Nearly 55% had been accessing OW or ODSP before the pilot. Around 40% received basic income for 9 to 12 months, 27% for 13 to 16 months, 27% for 17 to 20 months, and the rest had been receiving basic income for 21 to 26 months. This data is supplemented with open-ended responses from a survey that was also completed by 217 participants. Data were analysed using a reflexive thematic analysis approach. And for the purposes of this particular presentation, we've been looking at the data to answer the question, what are the key lessons learned from OBIP and how can we leverage those lessons internationally? Just a quick note that we present some quotes. We use pseudonyms for all of the quotes that we present. So the participants in the project reported a number of benefits of basic income. Many of these benefits substantiate and support evidence from other basic income pilot programs, both in Canada and in particular the MINCOM experience, and internationally. Participants reported reduced stress and anxiety, a more positive outlook on life, and increased self-confidence. They were better able to manage chronic conditions, for example, by buying a new mattress to be able to sleep better, or to take preventative measures. Consistent with MINCOM, they reported a reduction in primary and emergency healthcare utilization. Closely related to this, many of them reported improvements in housing and food security, for example, because they could move into better, less rundown, less dangerous living accommodations, access healthier food, and afford nutritional supplements. Consistent with previous studies, we also found positive incomes outcomes in relation to employment and education. Basic income allowed many participants to go back to school, and others were able to move into less precarious employment. And participants also reported positive outcomes for their social relationships. The profound extent of the impacts of basic income on recipients' health and well-being are sometimes hard to capture in the numbers, and qualitative data can provide a richness that helps to deepen our understanding. So, for example, one participant, Diana, said, open quote, "The time that I was on basic income was healing. The money was healing wounds and barriers that were built by poverty." Over to you, Kendal.
Okay, so as we continue to analyze the data with an openness to intersectionality, some of the preliminary themes that are appearing include the gendered experiences of participants, as well as the ways that class and disability status in particular overlap to create really unique experiences on the pilot. So study participants who had previously been accessing ODSP, the disability benefits, described the intensive intrusion and surveillance by the state, which was a key component of that program, and talked about the ways that OBIP differed from this. And so, for example, Frank described how, open quote, with ODSP, you have a paper for this and a paper for that. Basic income was a guarantee, and it allowed you to plan the simple things, very less intrusive compared to what ODSP is like. People could better themselves. We are also continuing to explore the impacts on employee bargaining power, especially for female participants. So a few interviewees described their experiences with sexual harassment and gender-based violence in the workplace, especially for those who worked in male-dominated occupations like car dealerships or in the service industry. Unfortunately, we don't have significant racial or ethnic diversity within the sample of participants, as most of the interviewees were white, but race would typically be one of the primary facets that we would also consider as part of this analysis. And so the other thing that we wanted to talk about today was the changing attitudes to government and what we're seeing come up in the data from that. And so the existing lack of trust in government from low-income Ontario residents meant that many who applied to participate in OBIP had pre-existing concerns about enrolling in the program. And so this required them, when they applied, to take a pretty big leap of faith to agree to participate. So one participant even described delaying his application because of the lack of confidence in government to implement the program effectively. And we know that there were issues with recruitment overall at the start of the project. For some participants, they felt like their attitude to government changed while on the pilot, and during OBIP, they described that their attitudes towards government a lot more relationally. So, for example, some participants described how receiving basic income made them feel cared for or taken care of by the government, and some said that receiving basic income was beginning to rebuild their trust in government, and a few discussed becoming more politically engaged and active while on the pilot. And then, of course, importantly, the premature cancellation of OBIP had devastating impacts on participants' attitudes to government, despite some of that, early evidence that receiving basic income was beginning to repair that long-standing broken trust. Participants referred to the cancellation as confirmation or evidence that they never should have trusted the government in the first place. So, for example, Douglas said, quote, "You're dealing with people who have been lied to by every level of government and every person at one point. The level of trust is way gone and it won't be there again. They're lost forever in that muck." And so finally, we just want to talk about the lessons that we can learn from some of these findings. So firstly, the rates of basic income, including for pilot programs, need to be high enough. We know from Kalnitsky's analysis of the Mincome project that in order for increased employee bargaining power and decreased exploitation, rates of basic income need to be sufficient. And so our findings show that benefits to employees who are in receipt of basic income might be especially important for female employees, disabled employees, all of those who are multiply marginalized in the labor market and who face violence and precarity in the workplace. But again, in order for that to be the case, the rates of payment need to be sufficient. Second, unconditionality is especially important in reducing state surveillance of the poor, which is an integral part of our current social assistance programs in Ontario and is especially intrusive for disabled people who are accessing ODSP. We also wanted to mention that recruitment for pilots might be challenging, especially where there is an existing lack of trust between potential participants and the government or organization implementing the program. Our findings suggest that the issue is not necessarily with basic income itself, but perhaps due, again, to that existing long-term distrust in government. And the sudden cancellation of pilot programs clearly has very serious negative consequences for participants, including in terms of their relationship to and perception of government. And so those who are interested in piloting basic income should consider the potential risks to the trusting relationships that they have in the event that a pilot cannot be sustained or something else happens. So we recommend that in order to foster strong relationships to government, future basic income programs should be implemented as permanent policies rather than pilots, should maintain minimal eligibility criteria, and avoid means testing or proof of deservedness. And that is all. There we go. Thank you. Oh, you're muted, Walid.
You'd think a year into the pandemic we'd have figured out this mute thing by now. I was just saying, big thank you to Kendal and Beth for sharing your research. As a Canadian and a resident of Ontario myself, I know I was displeased when I heard about the cancellation of the pilot, but it's great to see that people are doing research and getting critical insights from that data. If you have any questions for Kendal and Beth, please use the Ask a Question function and we'll try to get to them at the end. Next, I'd like to pass it off to our next speaker. I'm going to focus him on the screen now while I introduce him. There we go. Our next speaker is Jonathan Williams. Jonathan is the co-founder of UBI Wales and a lawyer for Watkins & Gunn. The lab is a collaboration of individuals, organizations, and policymakers working towards securing a universal basic income pilot in Wales. In May of 2021, following a successful campaign by the lab, where they asked candidates for the Senate election to pledge their support for a UBI pilot, the First Minister of Wales committed to running a trial. The trial will be the first in the UK. Jonathan has been passionate about UBI for nearly a decade. He has discussed the policy on BBC Wales Politics, BBC Radio Cymru, sorry for butchering that pronunciation, C4C News, Times Radio, and The Globalist. He is featured in The Guardian on several occasions, and he has written for The Journal.ie, Evolve Politics, and Hiraeth blog. So again, enough from me. I'm very excited to introduce Jonathan. Please take it away.
Hi everyone. Hi Congress. So thanks very much for coming along today. So I got to make sure I get my times right, because of course it's afternoon here and it's morning over there with you guys, or whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. I suppose that's the beauty of us doing this online. So I'll give you a bit of background about the lab and what we do and that type of thing, and then I'll sort of go into our campaign and what really led to the First Minister of Wales committing to a pilot, and then sort of briefly talk about what we hope that pilot would look like, because there's been some discussions about what it might look like, and so yeah, I'll go into that then. So UBI Lab Wales is part of UBI Lab Network, and UBI Lab Network is a group of volunteers, policymakers, as Walid mentioned, and there's around 40 labs across the globe. Now, around 2/3 of those are based in the UK, but there is a lab in Washington, DC, so there is one there in North America, and there's labs in, for example, Iceland, Budapest, and so on. I won't try and think of any more because I'll probably get them wrong. But there's 7 in Wales, and so we have the Wales lab, which acts as sort of the umbrella lab, and then there's labs in Cardiff, Swansea, and other county areas in Wales. And I suppose it's probably important to note as well, so there's 2 different governments. So there's one in Wales, where we have the Welsh Parliament, where the First Minister of Wales runs the country, and then we have the Westminster government as well. So there's some devolved powers in Wales, but the Westminster government, which is run by the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who I'm not a major fan of, but that's a conversation for another day, we don't have fully devolved powers, which it makes it interesting with this pilot, which I perhaps will touch on later on. But we started the project in Wales last year, in the summer of last year, and as Walid mentioned, I've been an advocate of the idea for about 10 years, but I think the pandemic really put a rocket at my backside and made me wanted to do something about it. You know, it's the pandemic has shown the mass equality out there, and so I really thought now's the time to do it. So we set up the Cardiff lab initially, and after discussing the idea of just running a pilot in Cardiff, so a small scale pilot in Cardiff, we discussed the idea with academics, politicians, and it was quickly brought to our attention that it might be difficult politically because the perception is, much like it is in England with London, for example, that a lot of things are done in Cardiff because it's the capital of Wales. And so we thought, well, it might actually be politically more feasible for us to do a pilot across Wales and get more residents in Wales doing it. So that's what we did. We set up the Wales lab, and the idea was then to set up different labs in different areas across Wales to try and engage people. So that's what we did, and that's how we've got 7 now. So the initial idea was to sort of go in these different county areas, ask the local councils to back a pilot in their area, so it would then ultimately put pressure on the Welsh government to do something about it. But it actually went a little bit backwards, because through lobbying all of these politicians in the Welsh Parliament, one of them actually decided to put a motion forward in the Welsh Parliament, and that motion was passed, so it got a majority. And it wasn't binding, but it was a huge show of confidence. So we actually went, that was sort of the end game for us to get the Welsh government to pass a motion. We actually done that before we got any councils to pass a motion, which was absolutely bizarre, but there we go. But with that, it sort of snowballed, and there was a lot of media attention that began, and the council started passing them. So initially, Cardiff Council, the leader there, wrote to the First Minister and said, look, we'd like to be part of this. And then Swansea passed the motion, RCT passed the motion. So I think there was 4 in total over the space of sort of 4 months, and politicians were becoming brave enough to start saying we support this idea now, whereas they were reserved about it before, at least that they wouldn't say it out in public. So that was, like I said, that time period where they passed the motion in the Parliament. Was in October, and then sort of next 5 months we started knocking down all of these councils, and as I said, the politicians were coming out in support. So with that, we decided, there was an election coming up in Wales, so the Senedd election was coming up, where we decide if we get a new First Minister and so on. So we set up the Pledge for UBI campaign. I think Walid might have a link to that. But ultimately, we drafted this pledge, and we asked all of the candidates that were running for the Senedd if they would sign up to it. And we got, I think, 106 candidates in total to sign up to it. So I think it was just over half. And then my maths isn't great. That's why I've become a lawyer. So we got, like I said, 106 candidates, and of those 106 candidates, 25 of them were elected. Now, there's only 60 Senedd seats, so we didn't quite get the majority, but nobody in government signed it, and none of the Conservatives signed it either. So we got a progressive majority, which was something. And if you took into consideration all of the people that were in government that told us behind closed doors that they actually liked the idea, then we probably did have that majority. So with that, there was cross-party support as well. So it wasn't just just one faction, if you will. It was Labour, the Liberal Democrats, the Green Party. So they all got behind this idea. And days later, so after the election finished and we had these 25 candidates signed up to it, I asked a journalist that I knew was interviewing Mark Drakeford to plant a question, and she asked him a question about whether or not he would be backing a pilot, and he announced that he would. And well, like Twitter does sometimes, it just went off a little bit. So we snipped the video, put it up on Twitter, and you I should probably mention you can find us on Twitter as well at UBI Lab Wales. But yeah, so we put the video up and it just blew up. The Guardian got in touch. I think there's a couple of articles perhaps Walid could share as well, and that we've sent. And it really has started to build momentum now. I mean, the media coverage just, like I said, blew up. It was a very busy couple of weeks for the lab, and it's beginning now to get support in Wales. So much so that a recent poll in Wales showed 69% of people want a trial to happen, which is quite incredible, really, when you think about it. And so I suppose that segues me nicely into the trial itself. And the trial at the moment, so it's only just been announced. Mark Drakeford, who's the first minister, as I think he announced it in the beginning of May. And so it's very early days. We're working on a model ourselves, which perhaps I'll touch on in a second. But so there's nothing planned, nothing's been set out in public. But what Mark Drakeford would like to do, apparently, is to run it with a particular cohort of people, and that cohort of people will be care leavers, so people who are in foster care and that type of thing, and when they're old enough and they leave, he would like to do that. Now, of course, those types of people certainly need all the support they can get coming out of care. Our worry is that if you do it with a particular cohort of people, then you don't get the data that you want. What we're hoping to do is to get something where employed people, unemployed people, people who are on pension, children, all of those, so a wide cohort of people to be participating in this trial, so that evidence then is as clear as it could be in terms of what it might look like if it was to be rolled out in Wales. Of course, if you're having this particular cohort of people, that you're not going to get that. And in addition to that as well, you're not going to see the community effect. So if you don't have a geographic pilot where it's concentrated in a particular geographic area, you won't see what that has impacts that has on a community. So what we're hoping to do, and this is where the difficulty is with these devolved powers, is that, so I should probably mention that first actually, is that we don't have powers over social security in Wales. So that's run by the Westminster government, and they give us the money and we then just distribute that money to people who need it. But in order for us to run a pilot where, for example, we can say, well, participant 1 who is receiving X benefits, well, we want to replace those benefits with a universal basic income, and we need those powers from Westminster. So the next campaign now, I'm sure, will be one where we say, excuse me, Boris Johnson, please can we have those powers? So that's where we are at the moment, and like I said, what we would like to do is get a pilot where you would include all of those people, and we would be able to change people's benefits as well. I think it's important to note, however, because of course this is a policy idea that has people from the left and the right supporting it. But I think it's very important to note, just finally, is that you have people who are on benefits, disablement benefits, housing benefits, and that type of thing, and then you also have people who are on unemployment benefits and that sort of thing. What we would hope to do is to just concentrate on sort of the unemployed benefit, so that side of it, and then people still get their housing and disablement benefits, so that they're not worse off. Whereas sort of people on the right of the argument want to just do one sort of one universal basic income, which would potentially leave people worse off. So yep, that's me, that's Wales. I hope you all enjoyed my rambling, and I'll pass it back over to Walid.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. It's amazing how grassroots effort like the one that you helped start can actually spiral and be a snowball to lead to so much change and get so much political action going. So thank you for sharing with us. So we started off in Ontario, where we discussed a pilot that was unfortunately canceled, but yielded some really interesting and helpful results. Then we went 5,000 kilometers to Wales, where there's hopefully an upcoming pilot that's going to generate more great results and more momentum for the basic income movement. And now we're going to travel another 7,000 kilometers to Kenya to hear from Caroline Teti, who is our next speaker and is going to speak about an ongoing basic income trial. So Caroline is from an organization called Give Directly. It's an award-winning NGO which has raised over $500 million since launching in 2011, delivered cash transfers to close to 900,000 people, and launched offices in 9 countries. Caroline is a social scientist trained in development, communications, gender, and human rights, and she has 16 years of experience working for nonprofits in Africa across program design, implementation, and advocacy. She currently works at Give Directly as the Global Director of Recipients Advocacy, based in Nairobi, Kenya, where she currently covers 9 countries in Africa, as well as US and humanitarian programs. And finally, while her role cuts across all cash transfer programs, including refugee projects, cash for development, and humanitarian cash, she'll be focusing her time with us today on Give Directly's basic income experiment in Kenya, which is the largest and longest basic income experiment in the world today. So without further ado, I will pass it off to Caroline. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Walid, and thanks everyone who has presented before me. The basic income advocacy is very important that we capture both the research side of things, active advocacy that is going on in the Wales, but also to demonstrate real time what basic income does to people who have benefited from this program. I'm lucky to have been a part of this, monumental experiment that Give Directly launched back in 2016. And I have watched the journey of recipients as they receive, support from us month on month, going through experiences, different moments in time, low seasons, COVID-19, and still, remaining beneficiaries of the Give Directly program. So for the Give Directly program, for those who may not know, we launched a basic income program in 2016, and that program was basically supposed to help us understand basic income better and prepare, evidence that could help us in basic income advocacy and drive public policy globally. We have the grand opportunity to be able to launch this project in Kenya, to be able to showcase, in addition to other basic income experiments and trials, what happens when basic income is implemented in a situation, in an environment like sub-Saharan Africa. This program sends we initially started with $22 a month for per person in a household as long as you are over 18 years. And now we have adjusted it to $30 a month because of inflation starting beginning of this project is unique in a number of ways. Number one is this experiment covers quite a number of people. We are in 2 different locations in the country, but the total number in terms of like 20,000, even within Give Directly, by the time we were launching this project, this was the largest we have ever launched a cash transfer program anywhere in our operations. Today, the story is different because of COVID-19, which I'll be speaking about shortly in relation to basic income. The other thing is this experiment gives us an opportunity to provide evidence for many questions that people have asked. The first is, should we be giving a basic income or should we just give people a lot of money at once? So the experiment was designed to provide some people with $500 at once, some people with $22 over 2 months, over two years, which is 24 months, which is the equivalent of the $500 given upfront. And then we have the long-term arm that is sending people money for 12 years. Like I said, having such an experiment in sub-Saharan Africa is something that the world is, should be looking up to. Like, this is something that we should be learning from, because lots and lots of aid comes down in sub-Saharan Africa, and we want to see whether basic income has its place in the new dispensation of aid distribution. Finally, the fact that it is long term, like 12 years is not a short time. When I started, I asked myself, oh my God, I'd love to see what happens to this experiment 12 years down. And now that we are just in the first year, I wonder whether I'll get that fund. Here we are, the 5th year now we've started, and the experiment is still holding. Now, we made sure that these people we are including in the program are poor enough to be able to provide proof for the impact of a basic income for people living in extreme poverty. So the selection criteria, apart from meeting the research criteria, was also supposed to meet the poverty criteria, which enabled us to, select people who lived under $2 a day to be enrolled in this program. So in the communities where we are living, we had evidence that people were earning, under $2 a day. Some said they earned like $3, but most of them were within $2. When we did an assessment, 40% of them told us that at any given time, they had never handled $20 at a go. So we are dealing with people who are pretty on the bottom line of the pyramid. So basic income in Kenya, has been a learning opportunity for us as Give Directly. We have provided unconditional cash. We have targeted people living in poverty. We have made sure that when we started it, we promised a certain amount, and that amount has been consistent. If not going down, we've actually increased it to cover for inflation. Now, that has opened for us windows that we had never thought about previously when we started. When we started this experiment, not so many people, including our own governments, knew anything about basic income. The best that was happening here were, social safety net programs that were run by government, which were targeting subsets of population. So when we set up this basic income experiment, there was a lot of skepticism, not just from the government, but also from multilateral and bilateral donors who are supporting Kenya government in the safety net program, because it was a many multitude of problems that people are facing in this country. Out of this program, we've been able to learn quite a bit as an organization. We've learned how to launch large programs like this, which has enabled us to launch subsequent programs during COVID-19. We've been able to set up customer response mechanisms, which responds to the needs of these 20,000 people. And today it is enabling us to also provide a response for hundreds of thousands of people. We've also been able to put in place technology that provides a platform that, builds trust with beneficiaries, ensuring that their money, reaches them through their mobile phones on time, as been promised. Now, those three are very important in delivering a universal basic income. And I'm sure when we are doing our advocacy, most people will ask, but how do we get money in the hands of so many people at the same time? The answer is, it is doable. We started with 20,000 people, and today we are delivering money to hundreds of thousands of people because of the lessons we learned from UBI. Today, we have sessions with Government of Kenya asking us to help, design programs that are targeting different populations. So during COVID, we worked very closely, and government itself gave us the data of the people to support because they saw the need. We have today got another request from the government to help target certain populations that are facing challenges, of unemployment and extreme poverty, just out of the lessons they've learned out of the basic income work that we have done. But what is happening with recipients, you may ask? The impact of basic income has been as many as the recipients that we have enrolled. Each person has a different story. One gentleman told us that before he received his income, he was just doing casual work. He was earning $500. 500 Kenya shillings is equivalent of $5 a day. And he had to do 2 jobs to be able to get $10 to meet his needs, subsistence needs, and rent. When we started sending him this money, he actually stopped, he stopped doing the casual work and went into an innovative program that he had been thinking about for some time, but he didn't have the resources. He started making lights. I mean, lamps like table lamps. You can think about table lamps, but these ones are just fabricated. So he fabricates table lamps, and he says he sells each of those at $7, and he can sell like 7 pieces a day. Compare what that means to $10 he was struggling to earn. Right now, he's doing work that he's passionate about. He's earning more, but that is not enough. In his community, he's contributing positively because those lamps is now a replacement of tin lamps, which were very unhealthy, and candles that women in his community were using in the evening as they sold their wares late into the night, 10 p.m. Today, they are using healthier, safer lamps, brighter lamps, and there is more hope. But that is not enough. He is also training younger people in his community to learn how to make these lamps. So when you're thinking about $30, you're thinking about food, but it's not just food. The story of this young man tells us that basic income delivers choice. It empowers communities. It impacts beyond the recipient. It creates opportunities for people who have not even received the money, the people who are learning under this gentleman. We also have one man who saved his money, and he said, out of the the $30 we sent him, he saved up and was able to save up to $270. Today, he is hatching chicks in using a hatchery, which gives him about 100 chicks in one hatching. Now, that is innovation. Nobody would tell you to go and hatch chicks. Nobody told him to go and save. The cash empowered him, and today he can say that beyond the $30, he has more than just the basic income. I'd like to conclude by saying that, COVID-19 has really influenced not just the global perspective of basic income, but also our perspective as Give Directly on how to deliver basic income. Today, as we speak, in a month, we are going to launch another phase of this work where we're going to be targeting thousands of people, starting with about 2,400, receiving a basic income for five years now committed. And we are looking to enrolling thousands of people in Kenya in a basic income program. We have also used the lessons we've learned from Kenya to launch a project in Togo that has delivered cash to over 180,000 people, sending instant cash through mobile money and making sure that they receive this money as part of the COVID response in 5 successive transfers that helps them to mitigate challenges that they faced during COVID-19. So this and more are evidence for us to continue pushing for basic income and to speak about the benefits that it brings to communities that are benefiting from it. Back to you, Walid.
Thank you very much, Caroline. It's always a pleasure hearing from you, and it's really inspiring to hear all the amazing work that you've been able to do at Give Directly and just the sheer amount of impact you have across so many lives. So thank you very much for sharing, and best of luck with your operations and the rest of the experiment. I think now, recognizing that we are coming up on time, or we are already a couple minutes over time, I just wanted to make sure that people had a chance to submit any final questions they might have had. One question that's come in from Alex is, what is the primary problem that you see basic income solving, and what do you see as the primary objective of these pilots? What exactly are they testing? Is it their potential as a poverty alleviation tool? Is it that it's a more efficient form of the social safety net? So if we could maybe just get the quick 30-second to 1-minute response from each of you, that would be quite helpful. Should we start? I think it was originally targeted at Jonathan when you were speaking, so maybe you can kick us off.
It's multifaceted. What it's trying to achieve. It's not just one thing. It is poverty. it is ensuring that people don't fall through the social security net by giving it to everyone. I think it is looking towards the future as a solution to automation, and potentially climate change as well. You know, the way in which we pay for a UBI perhaps could be done through things like carbon taxes and that type of thing. So, I think it's trying to tackle an array of things, really.
Thank you. Maybe we'll pass it off to Kendal or Beth, either one of you, both of you, as you wish.
Sure. I was just gonna say, yeah, I agree. I think, I think primarily keeping it focused on poverty is really important. But we know, of course, from basic income experiments and trials that have already happened, that there are going to be other impacts that, we can't even anticipate. And that's really exciting and neat and worthy of being studied. And I think I like the imagery of talking about basic income as a floor, an income floor, and comparing that to a social safety net, which is designed intentionally for people to fall through, designed intentionally with cracks and holes in it and not to catch everybody, whereas a floor is a lot more sturdy and solid and gives everyone kind of a firm place to stand on. So, yeah.
Thanks, Kendal. And Beth, anything to add? Or is that the response from the Ontario team?
No, I'm just actually responding to something in the chat at the moment, so I trust Kendal gave a great answer.
Yeah, Kendal did give a great answer. So I will I'll pass it off to Caroline.
Sure. Yeah, I think if you think about cash transfer as it is, cash transfers in themselves are multifaceted, just like my colleagues have said. But a basic income, if you think about giving everybody some little money that helps them to start their day, for me, is giving humanity back its dignity. People are living on different levels, and we are not going to solve all of the world's problems just by giving a basic income. So we should not start from that premise. But we know that it is unethical that some people can go without food, that some children can go without shelter, that basic needs cannot be met. And the reality of the matter is that lacking basic requirements disorients a human being. The moment you have a flaw, you have a starting point to start thinking as a human being. And we have seen this in our basic income program, that people who are receiving this money consistently will tell you that, previously I lived each day as it came. Today, I don't live each day as it comes. Today, I plan my days. I know there will be some little money coming from Give Directly. I will start from that. And I plan my month based on the deficit after that flow. That is what we want to address. These experiments are supposed to help us see how far basic income can help us redirect public policy, how we can help governments to be at better service to their people, how we can help donors and people in the aid sector to be less paternalistic, how we can give people an opportunity to make choices about their lives. Basic income is liberating. Simple things as going to a neighbor's house, and maybe most of you may not have this context, but where I come from, people live like beggars. Like, you go to your neighbor to ask for a simple thing like salt. When we got into some of these villages where we are giving money, one of the responses that we gave, while most people will wait for the big impact, the community members tell us that, the fact that today we know we are starting at the same level has built a lot of trust between us. I know when my neighbor comes to me to look for something as simple as salt, they truly are in need, because we are starting at the same level. Right now, the world is at different levels and we don't trust each other. Basic income can help us build trust with each other, because we know at the end of the day, we are all starting at the same level. Walid?
Thank you, Caroline. That was an incredibly powerful answer. And thank you to all of the panelists for their great answers as well. That actually wraps up our program for this session, but I wanted to thank all of our speakers again for their time today and sharing all of their insights and what they've been up to in the basic income movement around the world with us today. I'd like to also thank everybody who attended here, the session here today, to learn more about the state of the basic income movement across the world, and reminding us that even though this is the North America Basic Income Congress, this is actually a much more global movement, and there's exciting things happening all over the world. So before I end things off, I just wanted to highlight a few more sessions that you might be interested in today. One is in 6 minutes that I'll also be moderating, called The Art of Storytelling, which talks all about people's personal stories living under basic income. Also, we have 2 keynote sessions for today, one titled The Intersectionality of Basic Income at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and Pilots, Data, and the Drive Towards Cash Policies at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, if you want to learn more about some of the policies happening across North America. That's all from me. I hope you all enjoyed the session today and hope everybody has a wonderful conference. Take care.